All right, all right. Let's get started. Welcome to Finding Your HR Advocacy Voice podcast. And welcome. How are you doing today, Chris?
I'm doing fine. It's been a really busy day. I taught my HR class at IU in the morning and then jetted over to the Monroe County Convention Center for the South Central Indiana Human Resources Spring Conference. So always have a spring conference, yeah. So I was able to get the balance of that. And then as soon as that wrapped up, I hopped in the car and ran back here to do the podcast. So it's been a busy day.
It has for sure. So what did you take away from that spring conference? I'm curious real quick.
Sure. Yeah. So, well, basically we had Erin Stevens in the morning. She's on the Indiana State Council. She's the CLA leader, right? So you and I and the other CLA leaders report up to her for purposes of organizational design, right?
Yes.
At the state conference. And so she was talking about basically belonging and inclusion, right? It's because we know, and you're going to be talking about this later in the program, we've had a significant change in DEI. There's been a strong position taken against that by the Trump administration. I'm going to talk about that too, as it applies to the EEOC. And SHRM was actually way ahead of this. And this is where I give Johnny Taylor an awful lot of credit, because he saw this coming. I mean, even 2 years ago, he was talking about how DEI was off the rails and had so deviated in practice from its original intent, at least as SHRM understood it. And so he began pivoting SHRM away from it, a good solid year before all the Trump administration stuff came down. So
no, for sure, he definitely did see it coming.
Hey, and that's a real good example, right, of SHRM providing a leadership role, right? When you see things changing, how are we pivoting to address that, and how do you react to that? And SHRM did that, and so SHRM's pushing belonging and inclusion, right, which are critical elements of it. And so Erin talked about that, right? And because she's even in her own organization, she had where she works full time, right? She had a pretty prominent diversity role there. So so we had that, and then in the midpoint, just before lunch, we had a speaker talking about education, especially the Secure 2 Act as it applies to 401ks, which allows people to basically put money aside, almost like an emergency fund, and tax shelter it in such a way, and then you can pull it out and you don't have to repay it. Right?
Oh, okay.
Like the loan provisions in 401k, which we're all familiar with, right? Hardship loans in 401k.
Yes.
Hardship stuff, and then you borrow the money, and then you're penalized, and
yes,
back and all of that. Well, Secure 2 doesn't do any of that, and so it gives you all the protections of the 401k without all the hoo-ha. Right.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Because I've had to manage that through as a self-funded. Yes. And so I had to track. Yeah. So that's work for sure.
Secure 2 also has an auto enrollment feature for 401k. Right. So that was another piece of what the Obama administration was really concerned about. This goes all the way back to that. Right. Obama administration was really concerned about, which was under participation in 401k.
Okay.
So the Trump administration was concerned with that also. And so Secure 2 actually came out, started in the Obama administration, was completed in the Trump administration, and then pushed really hard in the Biden administration, which is not at all unusual, right? Once things are passed, it generally takes a couple cycles of administrations for things to take hold. And so that has the auto enrollment feature, right? So in the Secure 2 piece, employers can implement that, and then basically what you do is there's 401k becomes a default of opt-in at 3% contribution with an opportunity to opt out. Whereas before, remember, 401k was always, hey, you have to opt into it, you have to choose to do it, right?
Yes.
And so what Secure Act 2 does is say, hey, no, we're going to auto enroll you, and if you don't want to do it, then you can get out. And what that did do, and what is proven, is about, instead of only 20% of people enrolling in 401k, you now have 80% of the people auto-enrolled staying in and only 20% opting out. So
okay.
it's actually working. So the guy
Okay.
talked a lot, the presenter we had talked a lot about that.
Interesting.
And now you can use that in your organizations and get employees to save through that and save for catastrophic pieces, because the big thing he was talking about was financial health and how too many people don't have a catastrophic fund. Most households in the United States do not even have $1,000 saved up that they could take care of something serious.
So that's smart. So it's about auto enrolling people,
so
and then allowing them to opt out from that. Okay.
Auto enroll, and then you can save in this Secure 2 fund, and it doesn't have any of the, quite frankly, onerous provisions that the old 401k loan provision thing had, and it's clean.
Okay,
you can
and then streamline it,
and you can take it out without penalty and use it as long as it's for an emergency. So
okay,
it has a little bit of element of that, and so he did that. And then our final closing one was a guy who basically talked about leadership and purpose in organizations, and so it was a good that's really interesting, really good day. Yeah.
Now, so, is that something that's happening now, that most businesses here in Indiana can start using?
Actually, that's been in place since what was it, July of 24, I think is when.
Okay.
When I think it came fully online.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Well, like most legislation, things crawl along, right? So it kind of, from an advocacy standpoint, it kind of runs together in my head because it actually started in the Obama administration.
Okay.
Right? So I've talked about this before. It takes a long time for stuff to crawl through.
Wow.
A legislative process, and it's not unusual for things to go through multiple Congresses, right, to finally get done.
Wow. Yeah. That.
Yeah. Wow, I mean, I've been at this better part of 25 years now, and I've worked on legislation that took 8 years to pass, 10 years. Right. So, I mean, it's interesting because like now it's going to be like, how you pay attention to the water boiling. And then now you realize like, oh my gosh, it's really taking a long time. So now because we're paying attention, or at least I'm paying more attention to policies, it is going to be interesting to actually see it in real time and have a better understanding and realize nothing pops up out of anywhere. It's interesting now that, the reason everybody's watching it is because there's a lot of activity going on. And I think it's important to draw a distinction here. And I've even seen articles where people will write, why is Congress just sitting there as the president just does these things? And I'm saying because he's operating within his sole constitutional authority. It's the executive branch, right? So everything he's doing is in the executive branch. And so there just isn't a spot really for Congress to interfere in that. And there was a Supreme Court decision just 2 days ago, which basically said, hey, lower courts, you can't just temporary restraint order stuff all over the place. There's a process for that. And you can't just in a lower jurisdiction just constrain like that. It doesn't mean you can't hear cases. You can, but you can't just from where you sit just tie up the whole government. So that was. I mean,
it is interesting for sure because it really shows.
But everybody's paying attention to it now because there's so much going on.
And I think that we don't fully understand all of the rights that the president holds within his role, or within that role. Yeah, and now we're fully understanding that some people just didn't exercise, others didn't exercise all of those capabilities like he's stretching into.
He's doing. What I would say the main difference here is the volume and the pace.
Okay, he just keeps it going.
And the pace, right? And so,
yes.
And I think, quite frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if the next president doesn't have something similar. What I'm kind of looking at right now is I think that a byproduct of this is going to be a change in the electorate's expectations about campaign promises and what a president can and can't do.
Oh, for sure.
So I'll give you a real concrete example here. and this is just an observation, and I'm not taking one side or the other, because I talk about that all the time. We can't put on a jersey, right?
That's right.
And be effective advocates. So this is just an observation to illustrate what I'm talking about in terms of expectations of an electorate. So one of the clear differentiation I'm going to draw here is the issue of illegal immigration was like the number one issue in the last campaign, right? It was one or two for the entirety of the campaign. And for pretty much all 4 years of the Biden presidency, the argument that was made by the Biden administration was that in order for them to be able to take effective action on the border, Congress needed to pass different laws or give different amounts of money or whatever the heck it was. But the ball was basically thrown for the administration to Congress and say, hey, look, I in order for me as executive to do things I need to do, you guys need to do something, right? You're the legislative branch. I'm the executive. I don't have the tools to do it. You need to give me the tools to do it, right? That was kind of like the argument.
Okay.
And during the campaign, Vice President Harris often made the argument, carried through from the Biden administration, that, hey, it was the do nothing Congress that tied our hands. We couldn't do what we need to do at the border because Congress wouldn't act. Okay.
Okay.
So during the campaign, President Trump said, bull, there's lots of authority for the president to do things, and I'm going to fix this like on day one. He said a lot of things about day one. You may remember that. I mean, I heard day one, like I felt like 300 times.
He did. I mean, yeah.
In that campaign. Okay. So he comes in, and so almost immediately everything stopped at the border, to the point where we have almost no cross-border activity now. I mean, just none to speak of. We were getting what, 12, 14,000 a day for 4 years. And now it's nothing. And Congress didn't pass a single law. Congress did nothing, right? And so the point I'm making here is that when something that stark happens, so there's a real stark compare and contrast there, right? This is the point I'm making. So if you have somebody come in, you have one person say, I can't do it, and the next person say, I can, and then they do it. I think that I believe that kind of changes the level set of expectation about what a president can do when they make a campaign promise.
For sure.
So that I think this has kind of shifted the window, because as you might know, a lot of people in politics, and even we talk about this in advocacy, how important the first 100 days of an administration are, right? The first 100 days is when you lay down the big markers about what your administration is going to do. And that goes all the way back to Theodore Roosevelt. Okay, so it's FDR's first term that whole concept of the first 100 days comes in.
And real quick, I want to throw in there, it's like that HR 90 day, right? It's the micro, the micro of the macro.
Yeah, yes. Thank you. No, very good comparison. Thank you. I like the way you link that together. I appreciate that. But my point is that goes all the way back to FDR. Before FDR, nobody said that. After that, everybody talked about that. And the concept was you had basically 3 months to lay the groundwork to then be able to do something over the next 3.5 years. Okay?
Yes.
Change. I think Trump has changed that template. And I think because for him, I'll put it this way. It's been 100 days. It has now been 100 days. It's actually been 100 days now. I'm almost exhausted. For him, it was like the first, 8 hours? It felt like.
For sure. Yeah. And I think that's why it's important to really unpack, some of the what's happening federally that's impacting HR to even help.
Yeah, it has been so much and so fast. That's what I mean. It's in past presidents, I think they moved slower. They moved more measured. They just didn't look at it this way. And I think this has largely been a matter of perception. I think what happened here was President Trump looked at and said, instead of saying, what am I constrained from doing? He looked at it constitutionally. Well, he had a lot of lawyers looking at it. Let's be fair about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Looked at it and said, okay, what can we do within the bounds of the Constitution? See how that mindset changes.
Mm-hmm.
It's not it's not what can't I do, it's how much can I. Those are two completely different looks at the same problem. And I think what's happened here is, I think for the next president or two or three coming in, I think whatever party elects that person, it won't matter whether there's a Democrat or Republican here. The argument I'm making here is that doesn't matter, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that matters. But they're going to expect a lot, and they aren't going to settle for somebody saying, I can't.
No, I mean, honestly, I agree. It's totally shifted. And here's funny. And the funny thing, Chris, here is that I did a presentation the other day talking about the multi-generations within the workplace, and just looking at the generation that's coming up here soon, Generation Alpha. It is going to be a disruptive, innovative, sort of, it is going to be they're going to be disruptive in the workplace when you really think about it. And so it makes sense that this whole shift is really happening, even from how the government is being ran, and even how, how the workplaces are going to, change. I mean, even through that, 65% of the jobs coming up here, we can't even imagine what those jobs will be. So to just think about, we have no clue. So it makes sense. I agree with you on that level.
Full impact yet.
It's
impact yet.
So he's busted the door wide open for sure on the template of what we're going to expect from a president. No matter what party you're a part of, it does not matter. It's going to change it for everybody.
Changed what is possible.
Yep, for sure. For sure.
And I gotta tell you, and with Generation Z, because when we go into this next election, and I'm glad you brought that up, because 4 years from now, the very leading edge of Alpha, so the generation you just brought up, so the Alpha is behind Generation Z.
Yes.
Okay. So
Gen Zs,
So Gen Z, for all intents and purposes, is pretty much in our workforce already, right?
Yes, they are.
The end of Gen Z is in high school right now.
Yes.
So we mostly have Gen Z in the workforce right now. So they're baked in. And then you got Generation Y, which everybody thinks about the millennials as being young. The leading edge of Gen Y turns 45 this year. Think about that. Yes. And so we have the baby boomers that are pretty much going to be entirely out of the workforce, except for the business owners.
Yes.
Entirely out of the workforce by the next election, for all intents.
By 2029. Yeah, for sure. Yes.
So you're looking at a very different electorate in 4 years. And one of the things that really jumped out to me in polling yesterday was, as you know, we're not going to talk about tariffs on this thing because it isn't
no.
But I'm only going to bring it up here. I'm only going to bring it up here in the context of how disruptive those announcements were, and everybody lost their ever-loving mind. And it was funny to me how in social media, how everybody seemed to be egg price experts for about 60 days are now all of a sudden tariff experts. I'll leave that aside.
It's a lot. Yes. TikTok for sure. Jump on TikTok.
But here's my point. Everybody started looking at the polling, and they were looking to see if the president was losing support. And so he did lose a support from a pretty key constituency, and that was wealthy Republicans who are heavily invested in the stock market. Here's who he didn't lose: Gen Z.
Yeah.
He won Gen Z at the polls.
That says a lot. That really says a lot.
And so when that happened, a lot of people started, so Gen Z, why aren't you abandoning him? I mean, this cohort's abandoning him. Gen Z is happy with the whole damn thing being burned down.
Yeah. They want innovation. Like, they don't want to be held back.
They are perfectly careful with as far as they're concerned, just put a block Z, put a block of C4 on the whole thing. We think it's a racket. We think it's skewed against us. We don't see any path to retiring. We don't see any path to progressing ahead. We don't see any path to getting out of debt. We don't see any path to owning a home. We'll never be able to own a home. Hell, we can't even afford a car. So if that's the system we have to operate in, yeah, damn straight blow it up. So,
and it's interesting. And I think that just understanding the generations, just even, doing the research on that, it does kind of give you a little understanding of what's happening, because these kids are the future. They're changing things. They're challenging things.
Yes, they are.
With a loud voice, for sure.
And by the way, blow it up, they also mean where they work. So we need to.
For sure.
They're not just thinking about.
That's right. And it's so funny because I said in one of in the presentation that, really look at what the Gen Zs are doing in your workplaces, because they are really helping to usher in the Generation Alpha that's just going to come in and completely turn everything upside down.
And here's the thing about the Alphas, man, that's the COVID generation.
Yes.
And I will tell you about the Alpha. My daughter teaches elementary school. These kids are damn near feral. Them coupled with Z is going to be a force in the workplace for the next 20 years. A force. It's going to be old. But let me go ahead and move.
Okay, so let's talk about some of these things that have happened.
Talk about the federal stuff, and then I'll stop here at about halftime and let you pick up the state. So what I wanted to talk about here that we didn't have at our last program that I missed because people don't know, Tracy does. My car was hit just as I was supposed to come on the show. And so I couldn't make it because I was at the car. But what didn't happen last time, what wasn't true last time that is true now, we finally have confirmed cabinet heads of the 3 agencies that have the greatest impact on our profession in terms of regulation, guidance, and all that stuff. So that's the Department of Labor, the EEOC, and the NLRB. So the head of the DOL is Secretary Lori Chavez DeRaymer. And they had a little bit of trouble getting her over the line because a lot of the Republicans in the Senate were really skittish that she had so much union support.
And that's what it was. Okay.
And that's what it was. And President Trump knew that when he nominated her. She came from she was a Republican representative from the state of Washington in a very union heavy district in Washington state. Okay. And she won that seat. And the unions are quite comfortable with her. And she's comfortable with them. And so she was confirmed just about 15, 20 days ago. Since our a little bit scant a month, right? Because our program was last month. So she's in. We have a chair of the EEOC, that is Andrea Lucas. And now we have a chair of the NLRB. Well, we had a chair of the NLRB. So this one's a little tricky. So we had a chair of the NLRB. And this guy's name is Philip Miscamara. Okay. So President Trump made him chair like on day one. Now, the reason he did that was because that's exactly what President Biden did last time. So once somebody gets away with something, the other side doesn't.
Well, yeah.
Right? That's how it goes. That's how it goes. And so once that status quo has been changed, well, there's a new status quo, right? So he did that. But he had not yet had the opportunity to appoint new Republican commissioners, because remember, the NLRB and the EEOC are political creatures. So when you have a change of power, the new party coming in gets to choose its people to become the new majority in the EEOC or in the NLRB. And that just took a little bit of time. Now, so what was happening is that while the chair, Miscamara, had the ability to pick the cases that he wanted the NLRB to pick up, he didn't have the votes on the NLRB to do anything with them. So the NLRB was kind of like procedurally frozen for a couple of months while that was happening. But he now has a full board. He now has a full complement of Republican commissioners. And it's basically the same team that President Trump had last time. Which is interesting because President Trump did not bring back very many people at all from his last administration. If anybody noticed, that didn't happen. Very few people came back for a second act. The NLRB people, all of them were on the NLRB last time.
So why do you think that is? Why would you think?
I think
guess
that I think not everybody he had in his last government was necessarily in line with what he was trying to achieve.
But you think possibly he felt like the NLRB?
The NLRB was clearly.
Well, okay.
But you can pretty clearly see who he thinks had his back in the last administration. So,
and so for that chair,
name Linda McMahon.
Oh, okay.
She was the head of the Small Business Administration in his first administration,
Mm-hmm.
and now she's the head of the Department of Education. And I'm pretty confident she only came back because he said, all I need you to do is shut it down. Because most people do not want to come back to DC and be a cabinet head again because it's a brutal job. It's just a brutal job, right? And so that was that. So
then my question. So then, what do you think about? So going back to the DOL chair.
Yeah.
What do you? What sort of impact do you think?
So I'm glad you asked because that segues me into what I wanted to talk about. So
okay.
So Chavez DeRaymer Secretary Chavez DeRaymer is starting out on a listening tour.
Okay.
So she's doing a listening tour, and it's called the America Works Listening Tour. And she's doing this where she's going to crisscross the U.S. for like the next 2 months. And so it's very telling to me where she started out. So she started out in Pennsylvania, and surprise, surprise, all the states that she's going to visit on her listening tour were swing states won by the president in the last election, because we have midterm elections coming up next year.
Okay.
Right? So we're 2025 right now, and in November of 2026, we're going to have congressional elections, right? So I know people are tired and like, my God, we just got done with election. I know, but this is how we roll. So the House is up every 2 years, right?
Yes.
So this listening tour very neatly paints, I just happened to notice, all the swing states, right, that were in the last election. So she's starting out in Pennsylvania. And where did she start out? At a union organized plant, steel plant. So as you look at her listening tour, about half of her visits are union led and union organized, and about the other half are corporate. That's on purpose. That's on purpose. So make no mistake about it. And this has everything to do with the fact that President Trump pretty much damn near won the union vote. The only reason he didn't win it was because the government unions went against him. So he won the labor vote,
but not the actual unions.
He did not win the government union vote. The government union vote voted for the Democrats. The labor union vote went for Trump.
So the ones that were very present in the news, where you said went one way, but the people that were part of the groups individually went another way.
Yeah, and this is good old fashioned political payback, right? That's what this is. This is good old fashioned political payback. So
I think that's why it's just so important for HR pros to really understand it, right? So that we're as strategic as well.
So so the aha thing for me in DOL, from the DOL side, don't automatically assume in HR that this DOL is going to be favorable of management, full bore, and hostile to labor. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's not going to happen for sure.
Not going to happen. So, and this to me, when I looked at that listening tour, I saw where it was going, and I saw where she started. She started with organized labor.
So it's really more of the blue collar type work rather than the corporate office. Yeah.
And that's going to be the whole theme of this administration. It's very clear to me thematically what's happening here. This is a populist administration that really cares only about Main Street, and as far as Wall Street goes, they can go hang. And all you needed was Exhibit A. When the stock market fell like 2,000 points or whatever that was the other day. Did President Trump say, oh my God, I made a mistake. This is just terrible. I need to reverse course? No, he said the complete opposite. He said the complete opposite. And this is because, and this is another thing we need to understand for advocacy. You need to understand the lay of the political land so that you know how to talk and how to frame your arguments in advocacy relative to the gestalt of what's happening. Okay? Yes. So in the last election, again, the campaign, pay attention to the campaign. In the campaign, the Harris campaign made the same argument that the Biden administration made, which they said until they were blue in the face. If you think the economy is in bad shape, you're being lied to, because look at the stock market. Look at the stock market, look at the stock market, look at the stock market. Stock market's doing great. And the Trump administration argued the stock market isn't the labor market. It's not the economy. The economy is jobs. The economy is people who make things. The economy is trade and exchange of goods. The stock market is financial exchange. That's not
interesting. So
they drew that stark difference, and to everybody,
the wealthy versus okay.
So Trump was 100% running right down the lane of the people who were struggling to pay the rent, people who are struggling to pay for gas, people who are struggling to pay for that, and they had been on the broken end of the stick for the last 30, 40 years, right? Those folks have been taking it in the teeth. And he said, I hear you, I see you, I agree with you, and I'm going to be your champion. And so when he walks in and says, I'm going to do the tariffs, Wall Street lost its mind. And the Steelworkers Union said, thank God.
Interesting.
Okay.
Different. Okay. Interesting.
He did not win the Wall Street vote in the last election. He did not win the wealthy in the last election. He won the steelworkers. Right? So you got to, you have to understand how this is headed. And so what this means for, again, us in HR, what I'm trying to say is, as loudly as I can, do not make the assumption that because the Republicans won the election, that means this is a pro-management administration. It is a populist administration. So now let me move over to EOC Chair Andrea Lucas. So Andrea Lucas gets in, and there was a challenge to her and all that stuff. So it was a little tenuous for a few weeks, because Lord knows, I think it's something like 86 restraining orders were filed by judges against Trump administration, like in the first 3 weeks or something. So some things got slowed down, right? Some things got slowed down. The Supreme Court acted way too late, as far as I'm concerned. But at any rate, that happened. And so she was a little slow getting under gears because it was kind of clouded. So she comes in, and the first day that she's in, that the decks are totally clear, right? She's got the majority of commissioners. She's now open for business, right? Bang off the bat, she sends a letter to 20 top law firms in the United States, and she wants a detailed response from them, skippy fast, on their DEI-related employment practices. So she's looking at DEI and law.
So talk about that. Unpack that a little bit more.
I'm going to unpack it right now. Okay. Why would she do that?
I think to be able to go back, right, and file suits. Oh my gosh. Okay. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't even mean to talk about that. It was just a separate issue. But anyway, no, there was a lot of sand thrown in the gears. Leave that aside for just now.
Okay.
I'm getting back to Lucas. Okay, so first, boom, out of the back, she sent to these law firms and she asked about employment practices. This is a giant tell for us in HR. And I was unsurprised by this, because if you go all the way back to when she was in law school at the University of Virginia, she was the editor of the Virginia University of the Law School Law Review. Okay, so she was the editor of the law review. This is a big deal, right? That everybody who's editor of the law review is somebody, going to be somebody, right? And when she did that, the big story she read that got the big piece that she wrote that got a lot of traction everywhere was her argument that DEI practices in selection fall in complete conflict with Title VII of the Civil Rights Act on the basis that you can't discriminate on the basis of race. And DEI, as it was being practiced, did exactly that when it came to selection.
Yes.
And she did that when she was in college. I mean, she did that when she was in law school.
Oh, so she did that when she was in law school. Okay. I had to take that back. Okay.
Now she's the head of the EEOC. Do you think her mind has changed?
Now, how many years ago would you say that law school?
12. I forget how old she is.
Oh my gosh, 12 years ago, that long ago? She talked.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she
now
was
that's
all
interesting.
Over. She was all over.
I just, oh wow. I mean, wow. Yeah. I mean, it's just funny to me because it's like, to me, it's like not everybody was, really practiced, where at least where I worked, did not, talk about DEI. It wasn't even something that.
Yes.
So it's so interesting.
So we got it later in the Midwest than the coasts did.
Okay.
And she was like at ground zero. So if you're at the University of Virginia Law School, you're that's like the Boston, Washington, New York corridor, right?
Okay. So that's why they were
the DEI stuff started on the coast and worked its way inland.
Because it seems like soon as I learned about it, now it's right out the door, and it's like, okay, there's a history here.
We got it last. We got it last.
Interesting. Yeah. Anyway, okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
So you already know. So she showed her hand, right? So she is going to be like a hawk on this stuff. So if you are doing this, and remember, the Trump administration did away with affirmative action. Remember that? So
yes,
you can kind of see where this is headed, right? So, and she has also made it super clear that the EEOC is back to their original mission of considering individual claims of discrimination. So they are out of the group business. So the previous administration was really focused on finding groups of people. They wanted the EEOC to almost like operate like class action lawyers. And so she has now said, yeah, no, we're done with that. We're back to the original mission. We're going to consider, we are in the business of individual complaints of discrimination, and that's what we're going to go after, right?
And that's really interesting, and I just pulled up. I guess she also posted something on the EEOC about 4 weeks ago.
Yes,
where she says, they will hold accountable universities and colleges which have created hostile work 100%. Environments.
Yeah.
For Jewish employees. Okay, interesting.
She's going to do it. If you go back and read some of her stuff in law school. She hates that stuff with the fury of 1,000 suns. So I would not get in this woman's way. I'm telling you right now.
Because it is interesting. So, saying that, DEI practices, and I think that's what I read in an article somewhere. And I was trying to look for that.
Employment
related. So what do you, and that's by being exclusionary.
Correct.
And being, okay.
Correct, exactly. So she takes a literal reading of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. You will not discriminate on the basis of race. Okay, you will not discriminate on the basis of race. And when you take that at its pure reading of the law, that just means race. So you will not favor any race. Right? She takes a literal reading of it.
And so even looking at the state's policy, how there's some wording around even that in the state's version of,
when you talk about your part of it, this is all tied together.
It is for sure.
So,
okay,
go ahead. So we in HR need, because they're gonna start issuing guidance. There's no doubt in my mind they're gonna start issuing guidance here, skippy fast. But you can already see where this is headed.
Yes,
and we need to be aware of that. So then, and I already talked about the NLRB, right? So
for the NLRB, and you were saying that the chair finally has the people, anyone that's going to challenge.
So some big stuff has already happened in the NLRB.
Okay.
So right now we know the whole the whole piece, the point of view that the prior NLRB took about conduct rules or civility rules in the workplace is now out the window, right? So you know what I mean? So you know how.
Well, so what you say that again? You said civility?
Conduct or civility rules, right?
Okay.
So if you go all the way back to the first, let me think, was it? So it was the Obama administration. It was the tail end of the Obama administration and then the Trump administration. So there was, and SHRM was part of this. SHRM was part of this. So
okay.
the EEOC was supportive of it. And so basically, SHRM and SHRM was a champion of this on basically saying, hey, listen, what we really need in the workplace is civil discourse. This was all part and parcel of SHRM's inclusion argument. So we want civil discourse. And so they promoted and encouraged HR professionals, and naturally they did white papers and everything else like SHRM does, and says, hey, listen, we need to tell our workers what do we mean about civil conduct in a workplace? Well, you're not going to speak over somebody when they're speaking. You're not going to curse. You're going to let people have their say. We're going to be charitable toward one another. We're not going to be dismissive of each other's ideas, stuff like that, right?
Okay.
So HR started pushing that, SHRM started pushing that, and that was all bundled up and talked about colloquially as civil discourse or workplace conduct rules, right? About how we are going to treat one another with respect. Okay. All right. So that all started. So EEOC loved that. So this was the Obama EEOC loved that. Okay. The Obama NLRB hated that because they looked at as a constraint on Section 7 of the National Labor Relations Act, which governs the right of workers to organize. And so their point of view was workers sometimes have to get rowdy to organize. And if that means you have to cuss out your boss when they're doing something that's unfair, well, you should be allowed to do that as long as the reason you're cussing them out is for purposes of organizing a union.
Oh, interesting.
So you're standing up to management.
Okay,
and
yeah.
You just have to be coarse. And so that means you need to make a ruckus. That means you need to do stuff like this. So if you go on social media and trash your boss and call them horrible names, well, that's all part of organizing a union. You know, you're standing up to management. So the NLRB said, hey, that's got to be protected. And the EEOC looked at the NLRB and was like, you people are out of your minds. Keep in mind, both of these were in the Obama administration, right? These are two agencies. And so the NLRB started racking up companies who were doing this, right? And saying you can't have these policies. Then Trump won. And so then it went to the civility piece again. And then the Biden administration won, and then their NLRB took over, and they hated this stuff. So all of the civility stuff got run out real fast in the Biden administration. And so now this new NLRB has come in and say, that's all bullshit. You can have civility codes if you want. I mean, of course you should treat people with dignity and respect and all this. And you shouldn't cuss people out. And saying you're going to organize the union is no freaking excuse for doing that. So now the pendulum has swung the other way for 4 more years, right?
Oh, that is so interesting.
Who knows what happens in 4 more years, right? We don't really know. So that's kind of where we are with all that stuff right now.
So no changes really. So we haven't received any guidance yet.
These people just got these were the last 3 appointed, right? So this was the tail end of it, right?
Okay.
So the only other news, there was a withdrawal. President Trump withdrew the nomination of Elise Stefanik for the UN position.
Oh, so and
he did that just because the Republicans felt that they just couldn't really afford to not have her vote. The Republicans hold a pretty thin majority in the House. I think, what is it? Is it 7? Is it 7 seats?
Oh, okay.
Seven or eight, something like that.
But okay.
Yeah. And
she wasn't really liked that much by the Republic.
Oh no, she's beloved. Are you kidding me? She's like the number. I was shocked she was going to take the job. I have my money on her to be the next Speaker of the House.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, I do remember that was like in a few podcasts.
Go to the UN. I mean,
that's right. That's what you said.
I personally thought that was a tremendous waste of talent. Plus, you know, you're giving up that seat because you give up that seat. Well, now there's nobody in that seat. There's no Republican vote. Now New York's got to do a special election. That takes a hot minute, you know. So it to me, it made no political sense to do her because they were already doing so many, right? You took Rubio out of the Senate and put him at state. You took Waltz out of the House. You put him in at CIA. I mean, they took a lot of people out of Congress, Republicans, not a very big majority to work with to begin with. So the special elections were held. The Republicans won both of the seats in Florida. So no surprise there. But it's tenuous. It's tenuous. And clearly the caucus made it very clear the Trump administration, we just don't think that this is helpful. So somebody else is going to have to be nominated. Personally, I don't think that the Trump administration cares that much about the UN. So I don't know how much of a hurry he'll be in to appoint somebody, but we'll see. We'll see.
Okay, so now I understand. So the withdrawal is pretty much
that was purely political. That wasn't that she couldn't get confirmed. It's just the caucus prevailed on the Trump administration and said, we need her. And I still argue that I think she's a future Speaker of the House. I really do.
Did she just say that again? Oh, do you? Now, so when would that process?
She's the future Speaker of the House.
So would that happen in 2 years, like after?
Possibly.
Okay.
The Republican House is messy. And you got the Freedom Caucus there. There's just a lot going on in the House. The Republican House is more populist than the Senate. The Senate is actually behind the House. I think after one more cycle in the Senate, the Senate's going to be populist also. I've talked about this before. We're just on a big.
Yes. It's and I think it makes sense with the new generation coming in.
We're just in a populist swing, right?
Yes, it's totally swung that way.
Yeah.
And so it looks like, even understanding that helps to really think about, how HR can really be helpful, even, an advocate within the workplace, right?
You have to understand the context in which you are operating so that you know how to talk to the people you're talking to and how much of an ask you are making against the backdrop of what's happening. Okay?
Yes.
So that's what I'm saying. This is why I keep on saying it. Don't practice politics. For God's sakes, don't practice politics, but you need to understand
but definitely understand. Yeah.
So you don't walk into somebody's office and say something and look at you like you don't even know what's going on.
And that's for sure. That's for sure. Just to be able to step back and understand. I mean, I think that's why our conversations have been very helpful.
How big
and
I
would say,
making of them?
Yeah. And I would say, our conversations have been very helpful for me just because, I really do believe that you provide just that deeper understanding of how things work. And just understanding how things work, it helps you be a little bit more open-minded to be curious. Go ahead.
Yeah, I said it is connected. It's all connected.
So it's for sure.
Yeah, I kind of ate your show.
No, you're fine. You're fine. You're fine. Because this
talk about the Indiana General Assembly real quick.
Yes. So it's funny because a lot of those House bills are pretty much dead, right? And I think I kind of talked about that the last time. But what's alive is the Pharmacist Administration of Immunization. So, I don't think that's really anything that we just knew that was probably going to be happening. But that's still alive.
Right. That's good for us, for our employees, because now you can get, especially for HR pros who operate in the rural parts of the state, right, where some of our bigger factories are.
Yes.
This is going to be easier for their employees because if they can't get a doctor's appointment for an immunization, now they can, now you can do it at like CVS and Walgreens and stuff like that.
Well, not right now,
right? I mean,
not yet.
I think it won't go effect until July 1, but
July 1.
That one's pretty much going without modification, right? That you haven't seen that really.
I didn't see any modification on that one. And then the SB 480, that the prior authorization, I didn't see that much change, but we definitely see that going through for sure.
That's also a great boon to our employees too, because pre-auth will now be pretty much electronic and happen very, very quickly.
Yes. So, and then the SB 409, like the employee absence for case conference meeting. Yeah. So that's still going through. So I guess I wonder if that's something that does.
I think it'll go. It's just so narrowly tailored.
So how does that impact? So would HR pros need to update their handbooks to at least include that?
I don't think you'll have to change a handbook for it, but you will have to change the law. So basically, an employee says, I think where it's going to come up, Tracy, is where an employee comes in and they're out of PTO. And in a lot of companies, if you're out of PTO, I mean, you might be able to take time off, but it's certainly going to be unpaid. And there's going to be a limit as to how many of those unpaid days you can take, right?
Because So I wonder if there's any,
attendance problem. And I think where that might be an issue is if an employee comes in and says, hey, I know I'm out of PTO, but I've got to go to my child's case conference. Well, you're pretty much going to have to let them go.
Well, yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think that's the interesting is that, I don't see an organization I don't see someone holding someone back from that. But however,
I wonder when I see those bills, I was like, what company said no to that?
Yeah. What happened? Like, who did that?
Well, somebody did, or you wouldn't be able, the bill wouldn't be there. I mean, you and I both know the bill always starts for a reason.
Exactly. And I think that's why sometimes it's even, coming together and maybe trying to figure out, if there's any policies that we want to put out, or if we want to, kind of take action on, for sure, because we definitely can.
I've talked to my legislators before. I've talked to Todd Young before. I've talked to Mike Brown.
Yeah. And I think that would be cool. Like even, even taking the lead on something like that so that, we can say as HR professionals, we truly care about workplace here in the state of Indiana in our communities that, we're working in. But the other policy that, I really wanted to, hopefully we can really kind of unpack a little bit because I thought was very interesting is SB 289. And, at first it was called something else. And let's see if I have what the name of it was called here, but I don't.
Oh, did they create a new vehicle for it? Did they change
it? And so that, great question. I'm not really sure how to even really fully process it because I guess when I looked at it, I realized like that it's now called unlawful discrimination. So before it was called prohibiting DEI within institutions still,
Yeah. Is it still 489?
It's still 289.
Oh, 289. Sorry, 289.
Yes, okay. It's still the same bill.
They changed the title. Okay, so so that means they obviously went through a pretty significant language change at some point because that sounds like a brand new vehicle to me.
Yeah, I mean that's why I just thought.
I think they picked up another vehicle. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, I think that's a great question because I think that anybody looking at this who would have been following that would have said, well, wait a minute, they completely changed everything. Then when I looked at the versions of it, there's a lot of crossing out and a lot of that but totally different language that really says something else, which I just thought was very interesting.
Yeah. And another reason for doing that is when there's large scale revisions like that, sometimes that can be hard to keep the original sponsors on the bill.
Okay.
Because they're the ones that wrote it.
Okay.
So just imagine you wrote a bill and that's what you wanted. And then it went through all these processes and all of a sudden all the stuff you wanted is gone and all this other stuff is in, a lot of times the authors will say, well, then, I'm off, I'm out, right? This isn't what I wanted. You made it something else. And so usually they'll then create another vehicle at that time. Right. So,
okay. So I was hoping that maybe you can kind of help me.
Are you looking at it right now on site?
I'm actually looking at it right now. Yes.
How many sponsors does it have?
Let's see, sponsor 1, 2, 3. So it's Representative Chris Jeter, Representative Wendy McNamara, and Representative Shane Lindor.
Linder. Okay. All right. So, and you said that's a Senate? Senate?
Well, it started out maybe it started out the House, but but this is a SB.
So that's a Senate. No, so it originated in the Senate.
Yeah, it originated in the Senate.
So it's in the House right now, and the House is the one making all the changes.
Ooh, interesting. How would I know that? How can I check that?
Well, because it originated in the House, as Senate was passed out of the Senate. It had to have been.
Yes.
So it's in the House right now, because remember, they did the switch. So all the House bills,
yes,
all the House origin went to the Senate, and all the Senate origin went to the House. And so all these machinations have been going on in the House.
Yes.
And so
it was referred to the House on February 7th.
Right. So, but all the changes are going on in the House. But those 3 senators are the original sponsors, correct?
It says sponsors. I mean, it's authored. Okay, so authored by Senator Gary Byrne and Senator Tyler Johnson.
And are they still the authors on the bill?
It's still, they're still listed as authors.
So what that tells you then is they have to be cool with whatever's being done, or the caucus is told to be cool with what's being done. It's kind of hard to tell right now, but.
So I'll let me read it to you real quick if you don't mind.
They're still on the bill.
Yeah. It repeals provisions concerning university diversity committees, prohibits unlawful discrimination in education, public employment, and licensure, allows participation in public contracts by a minority business enterprise, women's business enterprise, and veteran business enterprise as currently authorized by law.
I was going to say that's all current law.
Okay. So permits scholarship based on a personal characteristic of the recipient if the scholarship is not funded by state funds or resources. Prohibits requiring as a condition of licensure that a person affirm that a person with a certain personal characteristic, one is inherently superior or inferior to a person with a different personal characteristic, 2 should be blamed for actions committed in the past, or 3 has a moral character that is determined by a personal characteristic of the person.
Precisely.
So, okay.
Okay. So that conforms very tightly to both the Trump administration's guidance and Governor Braun's.
And that's what and that's what I thought, and that's what I was saying. That's why I was making that mentioning that earlier.
They're trying to thread the needle of the federal guidance and the governor's guidance, and they're trying to make sure that all this hangs together.
Yes, and I got that sense as well. So
boy, that's a boatload of work to do that. I mean, wow, I don't envy the staff who
put that together, right? So what would you say? Like, what would you say your opinion on that is when it comes to?
Well, it's a Republican priority bill. You said it was 289, right?
Yes, and it says it's okay, and it also says on April 7th, committee report amend, do, pass, adopted.
That was the House committee?
House committee.
On April 7th. Okay, very good. So does it have any reference in there to conference committee yet?
It does not have.
Has it been assigned to a conference committee?
Does not say yet. No, for now, that's the last.
What's going to have to happen, because there were significant revisions from the original House document. So even if those senators are cool with it, they're going to have to create what are called conference committees. And we have this is the April 9th, and the session ends on
April 29th.
29th. That's what I thought. Okay. So in about another week or two, you're going to see these conference committees being created. And so a conference committee is created when there's been a substantial change in a bill that was made in the receiving house from what was passed out of the House of Origin. Okay. So
yes.
A conference committee, a small group of people, usually only like 3 or 4, picked by the leadership, of both in the House and Senate get together and make sure they're cool with the bill.
You said both House, both chambers.
But it's only like 3 or 4 people.
Okay. Okay.
So the House leadership and the Senate leadership, both Democrat and Republican, pick people to be on these conference committees, and it's their job to read it over, hash it out, and make sure everybody's cool. And then if the conference committee says fine, yes, it's good, it's great, well, then it gets voted. Then it'll get voted on in the House, passed out. So it would have passed the House, it would have passed the Senate, and then it goes to the governor's desk to get signed.
Okay. So
you're going to see conference committees pop up in like another 8 days or so.
Would that and would those be recorded for anyone who want, to probably listen to that?
You can follow it. I mean, if you go to the General Assembly site,
okay,
like you and I do,
and just click on the video camera.
Yeah, if you click on the legislation, look for latest bill actions, that's where you're going to see it.
Because those are always interesting to watch.
But that's going to get done. So
that's pretty much okay.
Personal guess would be because the original authors have not walked. Okay, so even though there have been substantial changes, the original authors have not walked, which tells me that either, like I said, either they're cool with it or their caucus is making them cool with it. Either way, that's what's happening. So what that tells me is that this bill is going pretty much like you see it. So I think that's
I think that, so I think what I can take from that is that, it doesn't mean like, maybe the word DEI is dead and any type of DEI practices that exclude anyone, of course, is dead.
So again, what people need to take away from this is that when it comes to the federal government and our state, and I would also argue the EEOC at this point, anything that you were doing that was exclusionary, whereby just by your identification of a person's race or a person's, however they identified themselves, if you were going to exclude on the basis of that and that alone, and that just set things, that was a template for how that person was treated and the opportunity they got or didn't get as a result of that. That is, if you're doing anything close to that after these laws are done, you can expect Todd Rokita and the EEOC to come knocking.
Yes, because that is part of the policy. You read
the language. It's plain on its face. It's plain on its face. So, we pretty much have our marching orders, right?
So I would say like ERGs are still, lawful. Of course, if you invite there's a SHRM article on that where they say that ERGs focusing on sex or race, of course, are not, legal, except if it's open to everyone, then it is.
That's it.
So it's really about making sure that we're focusing on that word exclusionary. Who are you excluding? If you're excluding somebody, then of course that's unlawful.
A lot of corporations, their ERGs were like, Black engineers, Hispanic engineers. It was just rampant segregation as far as the Title VII Civil Rights. I never understood that ERG structure. I mean, that was just blatant violation of the Title VII Civil Rights Act. A plain reading of it, I never understood it, but that's how a lot of companies did it. So you're
interesting.
Right. You can't do that. If you were doing that, you're going to have to stop.
Yeah, you can't be exclusionary because I know like there's an organization that, that's very well known. So I'm definitely not going to, say it on here, but they were doing that. They had ERGs, but it was open to everyone. So even if it was called, the Black engineers, if you're a white male, you can still join and be a part of the group. And yes.
Precisely.
And so,
you might
just
want to change the name if that's what you're doing, but while you're at it. But I really do think here SHRM is providing outstanding guidance on this stuff. SHRM is just, as far as I'm concerned, and I've had bones to pick with SHRM in the past, and I've been complained about that. But on this, they are out in front and leading well, as far as I'm concerned, and providing great resources to HR professionals navigating what is a pretty darn sensitive area.
Yes.
That is a very sensitive area.
But definitely should be something that, you know, people are bold enough to, you know, create the safe spaces to have those conversations. And that's another thing that SHRM also has, right? Like the civility toolbox, where you can, you know, where you can create these town halls and have the conversations that you need to have so that we can all move forward. Right. But I know we've come to the, you know, 5 minutes after.
We're 5 minutes past the time.
But thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chris. Of course, I always love our conversations and helping to, you know, helping HR professionals find your own voice, or like find their own voice, right? Because you don't have to be like me. You don't have to be like Chris. However, be educated, be informed, so that when you get out there and you start having your conversations, you know how to use your voice to say what needs to be said. Yeah. So have a beautiful day. And until next time.
Yep. See you next
month.
Bye. Bye.